The discovery. Jack Rayner had seen many wrecked starships in his life. He was a salvager, always hunting for old ships to strip for valuable parts. Some were warships, blasted apart in forgotten battles. Others were abandoned traders, their cargo still sitting in silent halls. But this ship, this was different. It floated in the cold darkness of space, just above a dead planet. The ship was massive, much larger than anything Jack had ever salvaged before. Its black surface was covered in strange markings, symbols that glowed faintly like dying embers. It looked ancient, yet somehow still intact, as if waiting for something or someone. Jack's small scavenger ship, the Rust Bucket, moved closer. His ship's sensors flickered wildly, struggling to scan the massive structure. The data made no sense. 1 second, the ship seemed dead. The next, it showed faint power readings. Jack smirked. "Looks like we got a mystery here." He grabbed his gear, a plasma cutter, flashlight, and a small pistol, just in case. Then he launched his grappling tether, locking onto the derelict ship. With a deep breath, he pushed off into the void and floated toward the dark entrance. The airlock was half open, as if someone had left in a hurry. Inside, the ship was silent. No flickering lights, no hum of engines, just darkness and cold metal. Jack activated his flashlight, the beam cutting through the dust floating in the air. The walls were lined with strange technology, organic-looking panels, like living circuits. He reached out and touched one. It was warm. That wasn't normal. "Creepy," he muttered, shaking his head. Jack moved deeper into the ship, stepping carefully. His boots echoed in the empty halls. The place felt too clean for a ship that had been abandoned for years. No rust, no signs of decay. It was as if time had stopped inside. As he reached what looked like the main corridor, his comms crackled. Static. Then a voice, soft, distant. "Leave." Jack froze. His pulse spiked. He spun around, flashlight shaking slightly. There was no one, just empty hallways stretching into the dark. "Must be the ship's old comm system," he muttered, though he didn't believe it himself. He continued forward, keeping his hand near his pistol. His flashlight beam flickered as if something unseen moved in the air. A faint whispering sound echoed through the halls. Jack clenched his jaw. He had been on plenty of ghost ships, but this one felt different. Then he found the control room. The consoles were covered in dust, but the screens still glowed faintly. A single holographic display hovered in the center, pulsing with weak energy. Jack stepped forward and activated the terminal. A deep hum vibrated through the floor. The ship was still alive. Jack grinned. Jackpot. This ship wasn't just any old wreck. It had working systems. If he could get the power running, it could be worth millions. He reached out to access the main controls. Thuti. A sound from behind. Jack spun around, gun raised. The hallway was empty. His heart pounded. He wasn't alone. Someone, or something, was here. He took a step back, scanning the shadows. His instincts screamed at him to leave, but his greed kept him frozen. He needed to claim this ship before anyone else did. Then, from the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes appeared. A figure stepped forward. A girl. But she wasn't human. Her skin was pale blue, her dark hair flowing like liquid in the zero-gravity air. She wore a torn, armored suit covered in the same strange symbols that lined the ship, and in her hands, a weapon pointed straight at him. "You don't belong here," she said coldly. Jack raised his hand slightly, keeping his pistol ready. "I was just looking around." The girl's eyes narrowed. "This is my home." Jack frowned. "This ship is abandoned. Wrecked. There's no one here but you." She didn't lower her weapon. "Leave. Now." The ship around them shuddered. The lights flickered, as if waking up from a long sleep. A deep mechanical voice echoed through the halls. "Intruder detected." Jack's stomach dropped. The ship wasn't dead. and it didn't want him here. The unexpected passenger. Jack Rayner had been in plenty of tight spots before. Pirates, malfunctioning life support, even an angry space whale once. But staring down an alien girl with a weapon in the middle of an abandoned starship, that was a new one. He kept his hands up, just enough to look non-threatening, but not so high that he couldn't go for his gun if needed. His flashlight flickered in the low gravity, casting long shadows across the strange metallic walls. The girl stood in the dim glow, her piercing silver eyes locked onto him. "You don't belong here," she repeated, her voice cold, but not aggressive. Jack forced a smirk. "Funny. I was about to say the same to you." The ship around them hummed, its deep vibrations sending a shiver through his boots. It was subtle, but Jack could tell. The ship was waking up. Intruder detected. That robotic voice hadn't come from the girl. It came from the ship itself. Jack didn't like that. Not one bit. "I don't want trouble," he said carefully. "Just looking for salvage." The girl's expression didn't change. "This is not salvage." Jack let out a slow breath. "Lady, it's a dead ship floating in space. No markings, no registry, no beacon. That means it's fair game." The girl's jaw tightened. "It's my home." Jack paused. That part didn't make sense. "Your home." He glanced around. "No offense, but you don't look like the janitor. How long have you been here?" Instead of answering, the girl took a step forward, keeping the weapon trained on him. Jack instinctively took a step back, and the floor shifted beneath him. He nearly lost his balance. The ship's metal plating retracted, shifting like moving puzzle pieces. New pathways formed while others disappeared. "What the hell?" Jack muttered. The girl didn't even flinch. "The ship is trying to decide what to do with you." Jack glanced at the walls. The strange glowing symbols pulsed, like veins filled with living energy. This wasn't just a derelict ship. It was a sentient one. Jack had heard stories about old alien vessels that could think for themselves. Self-repairing, self-sustaining. Most were just myths. But standing here, watching the walls breathe, Jack realized this wasn't a myth. The ship wasn't just alive. It was watching him. "I don't suppose you could tell it to let me go?" Jack asked. The girl hesitated, then lowered her weapon slightly. "I am trying." That was not a reassuring answer. Jack took another careful step back. "Look, I'm willing to walk away. No harm done. Just let me get to my ship, and I'll pretend I never saw this place." The girl shook her head. "It's not that simple. Once the ship marks someone as an intruder, it won't stop until it removes the threat." Jack's stomach tightened. "Removes? How?" Before she could answer, the ship made the decision for them. The walls trembled. The once silent corridors erupted with noise as panels slid open. From the darkness within, thin metallic tendrils emerged, twisting like mechanical snakes. Jack swore loudly. The girl reacted fast. She grabbed his arm and pulled him forward just as one of the tendrils lashed out, striking the ground where Jack had been standing a second ago. "Run," she shouted. Jack didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted down the shifting corridors as the ship came alive around them. The tendrils moved like hunting beasts, slamming into walls and tearing through old machinery. Sparks flew as panels short-circuited, filling the air with the smell of burnt metal. Jack reached for his pistol, firing off a few shots at the closest tendrils. The energy rounds sizzled against the metal, slowing them down, but not stopping them. "Whatever you did to piss off this ship, I hope it was worth it," Jack yelled. The girl didn't answer. She was too busy leading the way, taking sharp turns, as if she knew exactly where she was going. Jack followed, dodging debris and sliding under half-closed doors. Finally, they reached a circular chamber. Unlike the rest of the ship, this room looked pristine, untouched by time. In the center, a large control pillar pulsed with energy. Strange holographic symbols floated in the air, shifting and changing as the girl touched them. "What are you doing?" Jack demanded, catching his breath. Trying to make it stop, she said through gritted teeth. If I can override the security, it might. Bang! Something slammed against the doorway behind them. Jack turned to see a hulking mechanical guardian, its body made of the same shifting metal as the ship. It had no face, only a single glowing eye that burned like fire. Jack raised his pistol. Tell me you can shut this thing down. Like, right now. The girl's fingers moved faster over the controls. Almost. There. The mechanical guardian charged. Jack fired, but the bullets bounced off its armored body. Oh, come on. At the last second, the girl slammed her palm against the console. The ship shuddered violently. The guardian froze mid-step. The tendrils in the hallway retracted, slithering back into the walls. The deep hum of the ship's aggression faded. Jack let out a breath. You did it. The girl staggered, suddenly looking exhausted. For now. Jack lowered his gun, but didn't holster it yet. He still didn't trust her. Okay, I think it's time we had a real talk. What's going on here? Who are you? The girl hesitated before finally speaking. My name is Nira, she said. And this ship, it's the last of my people. Jack frowned. That didn't sound good. Before he could ask more, the ship's lights flickered. A deep, ancient voice whispered through the air. Memory core activating. Jack and Nira turned to the central pillar. A hologram appeared, a vision of the past. And what Jack saw changed everything. The ship's secret. The air inside the chamber felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. Jack stood beside Nira, his breathing still fast from the chase. His pistol was still in his hand, but he wasn't sure if he needed it anymore. The ship had stopped attacking, but it wasn't out of danger yet. In front of them, the hologram flickered, a projection of memories stored deep within the ship. The image wavered, then sharpened. Jack saw an alien world, golden towers stretching toward a green sky. Ships like this one hovered above the city, glowing symbols running along their surfaces. It looked like a civilization at its peak, full of life and knowledge. Then, the vision changed. A dark shadow spread over the city. Flashes of war, ships falling from the sky, explosions tearing through the towers. The green sky turned red with fire. A massive fleet of unknown ships descended, unleashing devastation. Jack watched in silence as the city crumbled. The hologram zoomed in, showing a group of survivors, mostly children, led by a few adults. They boarded the very ship they were standing in now, their faces full of fear and sorrow. The last of their kind. Then came the final image. A woman with silver eyes, just like Nira's. She stood at the control pillar, inputting commands with urgency. The ship powered up and vanished into the stars, escaping the destruction below. The memory ended. Jack exhaled, feeling the weight of what he had just seen. That was your home. Nira didn't look at him. Her gaze was locked on the flickering hologram, her hands clenched into fists. Not anymore. Jack ran a hand through his hair. All right, I get why you're so protective of this place. But why are you the only one left? Nira took a deep breath, then turned toward him. Because the others never woke up. Jack frowned. What do you mean? She motioned for him to follow. He hesitated for a second, but then holstered his pistol and walked after her. She led him deeper into the ship, past towering halls and strange passageways that seemed to shift on their own. Jack noticed the walls, smooth metal 1 second, then rippled like liquid the next. This ship wasn't just technology, it was something more. Finally, they'd reached a large chamber. Jack stepped inside and immediately felt his breath catch in his throat. Pods, dozens of them, lined up in neat rows, stretching into the darkness. Inside each one lay a body. Nira walked up to one of the pods and placed her hand on the glass. A faint blue glow pulsed inside. Cryosleep. They were supposed to wake up when we found a new home. But something went wrong. Jack studied the pods. The people inside looked peaceful, frozen in time. The same silver eyes. The same markings. He turned back to Nira. Why did you wake up, but not them? Nira swallowed. The ship, it chose me. Jack raised an eyebrow. Chose. She sighed. This ship is alive, Jack. It's not just metal and circuits. It thinks. It remembers. And when we were escaping, it decided to bond with one of us. A pilot. A guardian. Jack stared at her. And that's you. Nira nodded. When I woke up, the ship told me that I had to protect the others until they could wake up too. But she looked at the sleeping forms around her. It's been centuries, and I still don't know how to fix them. Jack rubbed his chin. This was bigger than he had expected. He had come looking for scrap, but he had stumbled onto a lost civilization, a ship that shouldn't exist, and a girl who had been fighting alone for years. All right, he said. Let's say I believe you. Why is the ship trying to kill me? Nira hesitated. The ship is damaged, she admitted. It's been alone for too long. It sees everything as a threat now. Jack raised an eyebrow. Even you. She nodded. Sometimes. Jack let out a slow breath. Great. So I'm stuck on a paranoid starship with a trigger-happy security system and no escape. Fantastic. Nira gave him a look. You came here looking for something valuable, didn't you? Jack smirked. Guilty. She crossed her arms. Well, you found something more valuable than scrap. If we can fix the ship, it could be worth more than anything you've ever seen. The technology here is beyond what humans have. It could change everything. Jack's mind raced. A ship like this, if it was still functional, it was priceless. Not just in money, but in history, power, and knowledge. But that was the problem. A ship this advanced, people would fight over it, kill for it. Governments, corporations, warlords, if they found out about this place, Nira wouldn't stand a chance. Jack sighed. You're right. This ship is worth more than I imagined, which is why we have a problem. Nira frowned. What do you mean? Jack met her eyes. Because if I figure out this place exists, someone else might too. As if on cue, the ship shuddered violently. A deep, warning hum vibrated through the air. Then, a voice, cold, robotic, and definitely not from this ship, crackled over Jack's communicator. Unidentified vessel detected. Powering weapons. Jack's stomach dropped. Nira's eyes widened. Who else is out there? Jack's fingers tightened around his pistol. I don't know, but I guarantee they're not here for a friendly chat. The ship's lights flickered red. The air felt charged, like the ship itself was preparing for war. And somewhere in the darkness of space, something was coming for them. Escape or fight. The ship's deep hum turned into a warning siren. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed a dark red, casting eerie shadows over the cryopods. Jack's pulse spiked. Someone had found them. Who the hell is that? He muttered, tapping the comlink on his wrist. Static hissed in response. The signal was being jammed. Nira's expression hardened. We need to move. Now. Jack didn't argue. He followed her as she sprinted down the corridor, the ship's shifting pathways parting for her as if recognizing her authority. Behind them, the warning sirens grew louder. As they ran, Jack's mind raced. Who else could be here? The ship was hidden, silent for centuries. No beacons, no distress signals, no reason for anyone to come looking. Unless. Jack cursed under his breath. Damn it. It's probably scavengers. Nira glanced at him. Your people. Jack gritted his teeth. Some, yeah, but not the good kind. If they found this place, they're here to strip it down. Sell everything. Maybe even take you. Nira's silver eyes darkened. They won't take anything. Jack wasn't so sure. Scavengers were ruthless. He had seen crews tear apart ships while people were still inside them. If this was one of those groups, they weren't leaving without a fight. As they turned a corner, the ship shuddered violently. knocking Jack off balance. He slammed into the wall and grunted in pain. "What the hell was that?" he groaned. Naira's hands flew across a control panel, her fingers moving like she had done this 1,000 times. A translucent screen appeared in front of them, showing the outside of the ship. Jack's stomach dropped. A massive scavenger vessel hovered outside, its rusted hull covered in battle scars and mismatched plating. It was ugly, built for one thing, ripping apart dead ships. But this wasn't a dead ship, and they weren't alone. Jack recognized the emblem painted on the side, a red skull with mechanical wings. "Void hounds," he muttered. Naira frowned. "You know them?" Jack nodded grimly. "Yeah, and they're bad news." The Void Hounds were a group of raiders and black market salvagers. They didn't just steal scrap, they stole everything and everyone. If they realized Naira was alive, they wouldn't just take the ship, they'd take her too. "We need to get the defenses online," Naira said, her voice tense. "The ship still has weapons, but they're offline." Jack hesitated. "Are we sure about that? Because last time I touched a control panel, this place tried to kill me." Naira shot him an impatient look. "The ship is wary of intruders, but I can control it, mostly." Jack did not like the sound of that, but they didn't have a choice. Another shudder rocked the ship. The Void Hounds had started cutting into the hull. If they breached the walls, they'd flood in like a pack of hungry wolves. Naira swaked her hand across the console. Holographic runes shifted and realigned, revealing a set of weapon controls. Jack's eyes widened. "Damn, this ship has guns." Naira nodded. "Big ones." Jack grinned. "Well, why didn't you say so?" She tapped a command. The ship responded instantly. Outside, hidden cannon ports slid open, revealing sleek alien turrets. The Void Hound ship didn't notice at first. They were too busy cutting into the hull. Then, with a deep hum, the first turret charged up. A brilliant pulse of energy erupted from the ship's side, slamming into the Void Hound's vessel. The impact ripped through their armor, sending shockwaves across their hull. Jack let out a whoop. "Hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about." Naira didn't celebrate. "They'll retaliate." Jack's grin faded. She was right. The Void Hound ship reeled from the blast, but it wasn't dead. If anything, they were angrier now. A mechanical voice blared over the external comms. "Unknown vessel, stand down and prepare for boarding." Jack snorted. "Yeah, that's not happening." The Void Hounds returned fire. Boom! A pair of plasma torpedoes shrieked toward them. The ship's shields flared, absorbing the first blast, but buckling under the second. Red lights flashed across the control panel. "Shields are down," Naira said, her voice tight. Jack clenched his jaw. "Then we better not get hit again." He grabbed the weapon controls, fingers flying over the unfamiliar interface. He wasn't a gunner, but he had fired enough ship weapons to know what he was doing. Targeting. Locked. Jack slammed the trigger. A streak of blue energy lanced out, punching through the Void Hound's engines. Boom! Flames erupted from their ship as half their thrusters exploded, sending them spinning. Jack pumped his fist. "Take that, you bastards." But then, a warning beep flashed across the screen. "Boarding parties inbound." Jack cursed. "They're coming in." Naira's face hardened. "Then we fight." Jack drew his pistol. "I was afraid you'd say that." The ship rumbled as docking clamps latched onto the hull. The Void Hounds had lost their main ship, but they still had boarding crafts. They were coming in fast. Naira tapped another panel. The walls shifted, sealing off certain sections of the ship. But it wouldn't be enough. "They'll get through eventually," she said. Jack checked his ammo. "Then we better make sure they regret it." A deep hiss echoed through the corridors. Jack turned, pistol raised. The first Void Hound raider stepped through the opening, a towering brute in a tattered combat suit, wielding a plasma rifle. His helmet's red visor gleamed in the dim light. He spotted Jack and grinned. "Well, well," the raider growled. "Looks like we found ourselves a payday." Jack smirked. "Buddy, you have no idea what you just walked into." He squeezed the trigger. The fight for the ship had begun. The captain's memory. The first plasma shot seared past Jack's head, burning into the metallic wall behind him. He dove for cover, rolling behind a curved console as the Voidhound raider opened fire. The ship's corridors, once silent and ancient, were now filled with the sounds of battle. Nira moved like lightning, her body weaving between the gunfire. With a swift motion, she raised her arm and activated a pulse dagger, a blade of pure energy flickering in her grip. The Voidhound barely had time to react. She lunged forward, her blade cutting through his armor with precision. Sparks flew, and the raider let out a choked gasp before collapsing to the ground. Jack peeked over the console. "Remind me never to piss you off." Nira ignored him, already turning to face the next threat. More Voidhounds were forcing their way in, armored boots stomping against the shifting floor. They weren't just mercenaries. They were seasoned killers, trained to hunt and capture. Jack didn't wait for an invitation. He aimed and fired, taking down a second raider before the rest returned fire. Boom! A grenade was tossed into the corridor. Jack barely had time to react before Nira grabbed his arm and pulled him through a side passage. The explosion rocked the ship, sending debris flying. Jack coughed as dust filled the air. "Okay, I'll admit it. That was too close." Nira's silver eyes scanned their surroundings. "We can't fight them all head-on." Jack reloaded his pistol. "So what's the plan?" Nira hesitated. "There's something I need to show you, but you have to trust me." Jack arched an eyebrow. "That's a big ask." She grabbed his wrist. "Then consider it your only option." With that, she dragged him deeper into the ship. The heart of the ship. They ran through twisting corridors, past walls that rippled and changed as they moved. Jack could barely keep track of where they were. Every hallway looked different than before. "This ship is messing with me," Jack muttered. Nira didn't slow down. "It's protecting itself. We're heading to the memory core." Jack frowned. "The what?" Before she could answer it, they arrived. The chamber was vast, unlike anything Jack had ever seen. The walls pulsed with golden light, forming intricate patterns of symbols that hovered in the air like living code. At the center stood a towering structure, resembling a throne of glowing circuits. Nira approached it, placing her hand against the surface. The ship responded instantly. The lights dimmed. The air shifted. And suddenly, Jack wasn't in the ship anymore. The past awakens. A vision surrounded him, vivid and clear. Jack stood in the middle of a massive alien city, watching as people moved around him, unaware of his presence. It was like stepping into a dream, except this wasn't a dream. It was a memory. Jack turned and saw the same woman from before, the one who had led the survivors into the ship. She was standing in a grand hall, surrounded by other figures in dark robes. Their expressions were grave. The woman spoke. "This ship is our last hope." A murmur ran through the group. One of the elders shook his head. "It is not ready." She clenched her fists. "If we stay here, we will die." Another elder spoke. "If we leave, we take the risk of awakening it." Jack felt a chill. Awakening what? The woman turned toward something behind Jack. He spun around and felt his stomach drop. At the far end of the room, locked inside a containment chamber, was a dark shape, a presence. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even fully formed. It was something else entirely. A mass of shifting energy, flickering between shapes and shadows. Jack's instincts screamed at him that it was alive and hungry. The woman placed her hand against the chamber. "I will control it." The vision shattered. Jack gasped as he was thrown back into reality, the ship's core chamber glowing brighter than before. He staggered, his breath ragged. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. Nera's expression was unreadable. That was the truth. Jack rubbed his temples. Okay, so let me get this straight. This ship isn't just an escape vessel. It's got something alive, locked inside it. Nera nodded. Jack exhaled. And let me guess, it's still here. The ship rumbled, as if answering him. Jack groaned. Of course it is. The void hounds close in. Before Jack could process any of this, the ship's alarms blared again. Nera turned to the controls. They're breaking through. Jack swore under his breath. Then we better stop them. They bolted back toward the breached section of the ship. The void hounds were inside now, storming the halls in tight formation. They weren't just shooting wildly anymore. They were moving with purpose. Jack knew what that meant. They're looking for you, he told Nera. She nodded grimly. They must have scanned the cryopods. Jack clenched his jaw. Then we need to stop them before they start taking prisoners. The ship's lights flickered, and suddenly, a mechanical voice whispered through the halls. Containment protocol. Activated. The walls began to shift again. Jack froze as something moved in the corner of his eye. Not a void hound. Not Nera. Something else. The ship wasn't just waking up anymore. It was releasing something, and Jack had a feeling he wasn't going to like it. Humanity's test. The ship was changing. Jack felt it in his bones. The air was thicker, charged with an unseen force that made his skin tingle. The smooth walls of the corridor pulsed as if they were breathing, and the symbols that once glowed faintly now blazed with violent energy. Something old was waking up. Something that didn't care if Jack and Nera were friend or foe. The ship had decided. And now it was time to prove if they were worthy. The enemy within. Jack tightened his grip on his pistol, but deep down, he knew it was useless. This wasn't just another firefight. This was something else entirely. Nera, he muttered, taking a cautious step back. Nera's silver eyes flickered with understanding. The ship, it's preparing for a test. Jack frowned. A test? What kind of test? The ship answered for her. A deep vibration ran through the floors, and the walls peeled apart, revealing a dark void beyond. Jack stumbled back, barely stopping himself from falling into the abyss. Then, from the darkness, something moved. A figure stepped forward, its body shifting like liquid metal. It had no face, only a smooth mask with a single glowing eye in the center. Its limbs stretched unnaturally, reforming with each step. It was tall, silent, and undeniably intelligent. Jack felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. What the hell is that? Nera's voice was barely above a whisper. The judge. Jack swallowed hard. Okay, that name doesn't sound good. Nera turned to him. The ship was designed to protect our people. It has a final protocol. If an intruder reaches the core, the judge decides whether they are worthy, or if they must be removed. Jack didn't like where this was going. He took a slow step away from the edge. Right. So how do we tell it that I'm on your side? Nera's expression was grim. We don't. Jack's stomach dropped. What do you mean we don't? Nera's voice was quiet but firm. It only recognizes one thing: intent. If it senses greed, violence, or deception, it will judge you as unworthy. Jack ran a hand through his hair. Great. And what happens if it decides I'm not worthy? Nera hesitated. You don't want to know. The judge raised its hand, and the air shifted. A heavy, crushing force pressed down on Jack, pushing him to his knees. His lungs burned. His mind screamed. The world around him blurred. A trial of the mind. Jack blinked, and suddenly he was somewhere else. No ship, no Nera, no void hounds, just emptiness. He was floating in a sea of stars, weightless, his body dissolving into the cosmos. Memories flickered in and out of existence, flashing before his eyes. His first job as a scavenger. The first time he betrayed someone for a better deal. The faces of those he left behind, forgotten. The judge's voice rumbled through the void. You are a taker. Jack's chest tightened. A taker. That was what he had always been, wasn't it? He found, he stripped, he sold. Never cared about the history, never cared about the people. The ship saw the truth. The judge showed him his reflection. A man built on greed, on selfishness, on looking out for himself and no one else. Was that all he was? Was that all he could ever be? The choice. Jack clenched his fists. No. The stars flickered. Jack gritted his teeth. I'm more than that. The judge's voice rumbled again. Prove it. A vision appeared before him. Nira, trapped, surrounded by void hounds. She was outnumbered, wounded. The scavengers had her on her knees, weapons trained at her head. And Jack. He was standing in the shadows, unnoticed, a ship waiting for him nearby. A single choice. Escape and live, or fight and die. Jack's breath was ragged. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to save himself. But something inside him shifted. For the first time in his life, he saw things differently. Nira wasn't just another stranger. She had saved him, trusted him, fought beside him. This ship wasn't just salvage. It was a legacy. And the Void Hounds, they weren't just another group of pirates. They were a threat to something greater than himself. Jack made his decision. He stepped into the light. The judge vanished, and the void collapsed around him. Return to the battle. Jack gasped as he snapped back to reality. His body hit the cold floor of the ship's core chamber. His lungs burned, his heart pounded. But he was alive. The judge stood before him, silent. Then, it bowed. Jack blinked in shock. Wait. What? Nira's voice was filled with awe. You passed. The ship stopped shaking. The red emergency lights faded, replaced by a soft, golden glow. Jack slowly stood, feeling an odd warmth spread through him. He wasn't the same man who had walked onto this ship hours ago. The ship recognized him now. He wasn't just a scavenger anymore. He was something more. The final battle. The moment of peace didn't last. A loud explosion ripped through the halls, shaking the ship to its core. Nira's eyes widened. The Void Hounds. Jack clenched his jaw. Then let's finish this. The ship hummed, but this time, it wasn't in fear. It was ready. Jack stepped forward, reaching for the control panel. The interface responded instantly, symbols flowing beneath his fingertips like liquid fire. For the first time, the ship accepted him. The weapons roared to life, and Jack smirked. Let's show these bastards what this ship can really do. A new alliance. The ship roared to life. Jack had never felt anything like it. The moment his fingers touched the control panel, a surge of energy pulsed through him. It was more than just activating a system. It was like the ship was listening to him, responding to his thoughts, recognizing him not as an intruder, but as one of its own. The golden symbols across the walls blazed brighter, filling the entire chamber with a warm, humming glow. The deep mechanical voice of the ship spoke, no longer hostile, no longer cold. Command recognized. Jack Rayner. Welcome. Jack blinked. Well, that's new. Nira's silver eyes widened. The ship accepted you. Jack smirked. Guess I make a good first impression. But there was no time to celebrate. Another explosion rocked the ship, shaking the walls and sending dust falling from the ceiling. A red warning pulse rippled across the control panel. Jack turned to Nira. We need to end this. Now. She nodded. Then let's fight. The last stand. The Void Hounds had breached the lower levels, forcing their way through with brute strength and firepower. Jack and Nira moved fast, sprinting through the shifting corridors, weapons drawn. The ship's eye was on their side now, actively sealing off passages behind them, cutting off enemy reinforcements. But it wouldn't be enough. The Void Hounds were relentless, pushing forward with one goal: to take the ship at any cost. Jack pressed his communicator, reconnecting to the ship's interface. Weapons online. The ship's voice responded. Primary cannons charge. Enemy boarding vessel locked. Jack grinned. Then fire. Outside, the ship's hidden cannons hummed with unstoppable power, and then released a devastating energy blast straight into the Void Hound's vessel. Boom! The enemy ship erupted into flames, its engines exploding from the inside. The force of the blast sent it spinning out of control, colliding with the debris field near the planet's atmosphere. One ship down. But the Void Hounds inside the ship, they were still coming. Jack and Nira skidded to a stop at the entrance of the main hangar, where the largest breach had been made. The scene before them was chaos. A dozen heavily armed Void Hound raiders were moving through the ship's hull breach, their weapons glowing in the dim light. Smoke and sparks filled the air as the invaders torched through bulkheads and forced their way forward. Jack gritted his teeth. Too many of them. Nira's grip on her pulse dagger tightened. Then we make them regret coming here. Jack activated the ship's control panel. How many automated defenses do we have left? The ship responded. Defensive drones online. Deploying now. Jack's grin widened. Perfect. From the shadows of the hangar, sleek, floating battle drones emerged, their energy cannons locking onto targets. For a second, the Void Hounds hesitated. Then hell broke loose. The battle for the ship. The first volley of laser fire streaked across the hangar, cutting through enemy armor and sending raiders crashing to the floor. The Void Hounds fired back, taking cover behind fallen debris and returning plasma bursts into the dark. Jack rolled behind a crate, lifting his pistol and taking quick, precise shots. He wasn't the best soldier in the galaxy, but he knew how to shoot fast and shoot smart. Nira, however, was something else. She moved like lightning, her blade glowing with deadly energy as she cut through enemy ranks with inhuman speed. A Void Hound swung a rifle toward her, but she twisted around the shot, slicing through his armor before he could even blink. Jack had to admit, she was terrifyingly good. But the Void Hounds weren't pushovers. Their leader, a massive cybernetically enhanced brute, stepped forward, wielding a heavy plasma cannon the size of Jack's torso. His glowing red visor locked onto them. Jack ducked just in time as the cannon fired, the blast ripping through the metal plating behind him. Nira turned toward Jack. You take the ship's defenses. I'll handle him. Jack gave her a look. You sure? Nira's blade pulsed. I don't need a gun. Jack smirked. All right. Don't die. Then he sprinted toward the main control console as Nira charged straight at the Void Hound leader, taking control. Jack reached the control panel, fingers flying over the glowing symbols. The ship responded immediately, bringing up a tactical display of the hangar. Defensive turrets were still online. Jack tapped the screen. Let's give them a warm send-off. The ship's voice confirmed. Turrets activated. Instantly, 2 automated gun emplacements descended from the ceiling, spinning to life and locking onto the Void Hounds. VZZZT. Boom. A rapid storm of laser fire tore through enemy ranks, sending raiders scrambling for cover. Jack watched as the battle shifted in their favor. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw Nira's fight reach its climax. The Void Hound leader lunged at her, swinging his massive arm, but she ducked and spun, slashing across his chest in a single fluid motion. For a moment, the brute froze, his red visor flickering. Then, with a heavy thud, he collapsed. Jack whistled. Remind me never to fight you. Nira wiped the blood from her blade. Smart choice. With their leader down and their ship destroyed, the remaining Void Hounds panicked. Jack gave them a choice. He activated the external comms. Listen up, scumbags. You've got exactly 10 seconds to surrender or take your chances with the escape pods. Either way, this ship is staying right where it is. The surviving raiders didn't hesitate. They ran. The last few moments of battle were nothing but echoes of footsteps disappearing into the halls. Then, finally, silence. Jack let out a breath. We did it. Nera looked around. It's over. The ship, sensing the threat had passed, let out a low, resonant hum. The golden symbols along the walls softened, pulsing with a steady rhythm. The ship was alive, and it was at peace again. A new beginning. Jack and Nera stood in the control chamber, looking at the glowing interface before them. Jack crossed his arms. So, what now? Nera exhaled, gazing at the cryopods deeper within the ship. I keep my promise. I wake them up. Jack nodded. And the ship? Nera placed her hand on the controls. The ship hummed in response, as if welcoming her touch. She turned to him. It's not mine alone anymore. Jack frowned. Wait, are you saying? Nera smirked. You fought for this ship. You earned its trust. That makes you part of it now. Jack blinked. Huh. He had come here looking for scrap. Instead, he had found something worth more than he ever imagined. A legacy. A new purpose. A home. Jack chuckled, running a hand through his hair. Guess I salvaged something better than a starship today. Nera tilted her head. And what's that? Jack smirked. An adventure. The ship hummed, its lights pulsing as it powered up, engines roaring to life for the first time in centuries. Together, Jack and Nera stepped forward, and the ship carried them into the stars.